Hello everyone, welcome to another pen, ink and watercolor sketching tutorial. Today I'm going to show you how I sketched and painted this street scene with the help of this screenshot from Google Street View. So let's analyze this first. Now, this is a street scene here in Singapore. The sunlight is actually coming from this direction because we see the cast shadow here and also here. And the vanishing point, there are two actually, one here outside of this screenshot and one here. And the diagonal lines, you see, they are quite dramatic because the camera that's used by the Google car that goes around to capture all these images, that's an ultra wide angle lens. So all these diagonal lines, they will be very dynamic. So since we are working with this reference, I'm just going to copy what I see here. But if you are actually drawing on location, the lines are not going to be so steep because first of all, our eyes, they don't have the ultra wide angle view, and secondly, we are not that tall. So if you take a look and try and find the the horizon line, it's actually here, which is much higher compared to all the people seated here. So the horizon line is actually here, and all the people, they are shorter. All right, let's take a look at this sketch that I have drawn yesterday. I will be creating a brand new sketch rather than show you what I did here because I didn't record this drawing. The colors I use here, this is probably raw sienna or yellow ochre. I cannot remember the exact color. I have a warm red. This is French ultramarine. And this is lemon yellow, if I remember correctly. So I used lemon yellow, this warm red, probably a scarlet, French ultramarine, and raw sienna. So just 4 colors for this particular sketch. But for today's tutorial, I will be using cobalt blue deep instead and indentrum blue just to get the darker shadows, just to make it easier for me to mix the darker shadows here. The pen and ink portion took me maybe 10 minutes, so this is a really quick and loose sketch. So in this video, I'm going to show you in real time how I sketched this really quickly. I have my own artistic interpretation of this scene. So if you take a look at the reference photo, this area here, it's actually in shadow, but here I chose to have it lit by light. So the shadow only covers this area here and the ground here. The painting portion took much longer, maybe 20 minutes, because I have to paint in several layers and I have to wait for the first layer to dry before I can paint the second layer. So as you can see, this sketch, it doesn't have a lot of details. This was just drawn for fun. This was drawn to play around with color mixing and also to practice painting shadows. The paper I'm using is Fabriano 5 watercolor paper with 50% cotton, and this is a Sailor fountain pen with a zoom nib. I'm using this nib because it can produce thick lines which are easier for the camera to capture for you guys to see, and the ink is Noodlers Bulletproof black ink. So let's start by drawing the building on the left first because we need to fit that building on the page and leave some space for the road here. So I'm going to draw this pillar on the left, on the right. This is the bottom of this shape here. There is this lamp which I did not draw in the earlier sketch, so I'm going to draw that here. I like this lamp, this street lamp, because it overlaps the shop house to create some foreground and background elements. Now this is the second floor, and the first floor is about 1.5 times the height of this, so the lamp will end somewhere here. And we can draw the diagonal roof, which will go down all the way here and end here, midpoint of this point here. So we can just join it like this. And we can draw the other roof here. Now, the height of the points here, it's important, but where the points are on the horizontal axis, it's not as important. So for example, if you place the end of the roof here, obviously it's going to look wrong. But if you have the point here, but you move this point here, for example, it's still going to look wrong, but it's less wrong compared to placing the point right here. Because if you place the point here, it just means that you are squashing the perspective. If you place this point here, it means you got the perspective wrong. Okay, so let's draw the bottom here of this second floor. Goes all the way up like this. Okay, there are a few awnings here, the shelter. So let's draw those. One big one here. When you draw quick, you have to simplify. One good thing about drawing quickly is you don't have time to think too much. Sometimes when you think too much, it actually hinders your drawing. It makes you draw too much details or draw inaccurately because your brain is starting to tell you that, hey, a building should look like this, a rectangle should look like this, a window should look like this, but actually when you are drawing, you should be drawing what you see, not what you think you see. For all these windows here, I'm just using really thin lines to draw them. The thicker lines will be reserved for drawing the outlines and drawing elements in the foreground. We have this awning behind the lamppost, behind this awning. Oh, let's draw this first. This is tilted at an angle. And then we have this behind. So I like this overlapping elements. This line will come down here. And then we have another awning here below. There is a street sign here, no entry sign. And this will go down to this point here where there is a red chair in front of it. And there is a table in front of the red chair, and there is a red chair in front of the table. So for the red chairs here, I'm just going to draw them really simply. So when I'm drawing, I'm constantly thinking about foreground and background elements. For elements in the foreground, obviously you will need to draw them first before you draw the background elements. It's easier that way. The end of the street here will end somewhere here because it aligns with this thing here, which is actually displaying the menu for the restaurant. And now that I know where this will end, I can just draw this diagonal line here like this. There is a curve here. And here I can draw all the chairs. Drawing chairs, you need patience. If you can draw chairs really well, it means you have discipline. It means you have patience. And if you want to draw chairs well, you have to practice. You can go to cafes to practice because there are lots of chairs in lots of different angles. And there are a lot of customers here at this shop. So I need to draw the shapes that represent people who are seated on the chairs. Oops, let's put a waiter there. Fridge and stores. All this will be painted like really dark later on, so the details are not that important. But I do want to show the chairs because the red colored chairs, they are quite striking. Okay, another person seated here on a red chair. So a lot of this sketch really is about simplification. And usually when I draw, I will think like this. If I can draw with as few lines as possible, what are the lines that I will draw? So that is basically how I would simplify. And you don't really, sometimes you don't really have to draw that accurately, especially when it comes to suggesting details. So for example, here I can draw some semicircles to represent the chairs, some horizontal or tilted lines to represent the tables, some black dots to represent people seated at the tables. Simplification is very important, especially if you want to draw like really quickly. Okay, we have some shops in the background as well, some pillars holding up the second floor. All these will be painted like really dark later on, so I don't have to add like too many details. Sometimes I like to add some lines or some dots to represent the lighting that's used by the shop, so that later on when I paint over, I can leave some area white to represent the lighting. Okay, let's continue to draw the chairs. Those chairs are difficult to draw, but you have to draw them because they look good when you get them right. Windows here. Once you draw the big shapes, you can then fill in the details later on. Filling in the details, it's easy when you have the big shapes right. So it's looking as if this sketch is going to have more details compared to my earlier sketch. Okay, so let's draw the trees now. On the right side, there is one tree that's behind this street sign that goes all the way up here, comes down behind the street sign. I like to place some horizontal lines to remind me that this is a tree and not a pillar. Some leaves drawn really quickly. Another tree will be here. This distance is about the same as this distance, or maybe this distance is slightly larger than this distance, but the height of the tree will start here relative to this point here. And I may want this part to jut out slightly so that I can draw the water pipe. Notice the leaves for my trees, they are very stylized. The bottom of the tree will end somewhere here. So when I am drawing, I am always thinking about where the lines are going to end, which makes it easier for me to draw faster. So for example, when I draw this tree, I want to know where it's going to start. It's going to start somewhere here relative to here, and it's going to end somewhere here relative to here. And the horizon line, it's here. So this 1 point perspective, or is it 2 point perspective? Anyway, this finishing point will go to somewhere here, and this is the horizon line. And there are some cars parked here, which I will draw later on. Let's continue to draw the palm trees here. So for the trees in the foreground, I can draw more details. I can make the shapes of the leaves more recognizable. For trees in the background, all the leaves are going to merge together into one big shape. And now that we have drawn the trees, we can draw the buildings behind the trees. Let's draw the tilted roofs first. There seems to be another building here, another building here, some windows here. Okay, some chairs again. This time we have white chairs, some awnings here. Yeah, this sketch is looking like it needs a bit more detail. Windows, signboards sticking out from the side of the building. Some of the signboards are square, some are vertical rectangles. Have some variation, definitely. And plants, grass just below at the bottom of the trees. Okay, so let's move on to the right side. We have the palm trees on the right side as well. One here, one here. Let's see how many there are. 4. This particular one is quite tall, so let's draw that. When you are drawing really quickly, the lines that you draw, they will look very different from the lines that were drawn carefully. So what I'm trying to say is you cannot draw loose lines carefully. In order to draw like loose lines, you have to draw them really quickly. I think it really comes down to what type of look you are trying to get. We have a tree here where the leaves are cropped off at the pitch here, which is nice. Sometimes you want to have elements that are cropped out because it's really impossible to fit everything in. Okay, let's draw the cars because the cars are in front of the trees, which are in front of the building behind. So the first car I'm going to draw is the one that is the biggest. The bottom of the car will be here relative to this here. So the width of the car will be it's about half the street. So let's draw something like this. We have the lights, the front, the wheels, and the cars in the background. For the cars in the background that stretch all the way to the back, I may actually just represent them with horizontal lines and vertical lines like this. I don't actually have to draw the cars in detail. Now, if you are not good with simplification, one trick that you can do is to draw on a really small page. That way, you will be forced to simplify what you see. Because, when drawing on a small page, you don't really have space to draw details. You have to simplify. Okay, so here there seems to be some structure. I'm not sure what these structures are. I'm not exactly sure what these structures are. Anyway, if I am drawing on location, I will be able to see what those structures are. Just that when you're working with photos, you have to work with what you have. Some tables here. Let's draw the street sign here, this no entry sign here. Tables here are also in perspective. The chairs beneath the tablecloth are also in perspective. Oh, more chairs. There's this tree here. Goes down all the way here. I may have drawn this tree at the wrong position, but it doesn't really matter. Anyway, let's draw the buildings behind the trees or between the trees. So we have one building here, an awning here. So when drawing all these shapes between the trees, I'm actually just placing the elements between the trees. Some windows. seems to be a roof here, shop house that goes here. Okay, I think I drew some of these areas here a bit off, doesn't really matter. There's this awning here, and this diagonal line that goes to the vanishing point. And we have this here. This is the roof for the second floor. There's this pipe thing going on here. Some windows, white framed windows with black glass. So later on when I paint this, I need to leave the white. Seems like there's a signboard here with some text on it, which I'm going to paint later on with the Posca marker. So this tall building here will still remain in the background with thin lines. There is another tall building here, which I'm going to draw also with thin lines. So you can vary the thickness of the lines to create foreground and background illusion. If you draw this building with thick lines and you have the building in front with thick lines, sometimes it may look as if this building is a structure that belongs to the shop house in front. So for example, there's this tall residential block behind, which I'm going to draw with really thin lines by holding my fountain pen vertically like this. Another building here. This one definitely has to be drawn with thin lines. Otherwise, it's going to look as if this is part of this building in front. Let's see if there are any other things I need to draw. Some trees here. Another tall building here. Some perspective line that points down to give the illusion of perspective. Okay, so this sketch is almost done. I just want to add a little bit more detail. So this was probably drawn under 15 minutes. When you reach the stage where you don't know what else you want to add to the sketch, that is the point where you can end the sketch. Okay, I may need to draw a few more chairs here, unfortunately, because there are just so many chairs here. Let's take a closer look at the sketch. So you can see here on the ground floor, it's very busy because there are lots of people. Windows drawn very simply, they are just rectangles. Horizontal rectangles with vertical rectangles in them. This one, it's easy to draw because it's facing forward, it's just a rectangle, but for the windows on the side, they have to follow their perspective, and all these lines here, they have to follow their perspective. Okay. Sometimes it's good to leave out certain details, because if you add like too much details, the sketch can look too busy. So you want to strike the right balance with how much detail you should include and how much you should leave out. You don't have to draw everything. That's the thing with art. Unlike when you take a photo, the photo will include everything, but with art you don't have to include everything. Okay, we have some plants here in the background. Alright, time to paint. I have already squeezed out some Indentron blue here. This is PB60 and this is PB74 Cobalt Blue Deep. I have my paper on this stand. so that I can paint at an angle so that the paper can flow down. So let me wet the sky first. Now the brush that I'm using, this is the Winsor & Newton Series 7 Kolinsky brush, the one that I reviewed and didn't give a very good or favorable review for. The thing with this brush is, I think the company they apply, I'm not sure what they apply onto the hair, but it takes weeks to get that off. So now it's actually performing much better compared to the time when I was reviewing this brush. But it's still like not as good compared to Da Vinci and Escoda for the price that Winsor & Newton is charging. Okay, so let me just wet the sky and paint some cobalt blue dip onto the sky. This is a very beautiful granulating color. I may need to add more paint for the add more water for the paint to flow. So I'm going to paint over all the areas where it's going to look dark. So that means I have to paint over this building here, this building here, and I also want to paint over to the shadow on the ground. So let me just clean up the bottom here. Let's see if I can scrub this off. Add some water and scrub it off. This is cobalt blue dip PB74. So it's a non-staining color. You can actually scrub it off. That's nice. I've just painted this area blue. Now this wall here is going to be white. Earlier on this area was white as well, but I have to paint this blue so that you can get the contrast. I've just switched to a smaller brush to paint the smaller areas. So this is now dry. I'm going to paint this building here first with what seems like yellow ochre to me, and also for these buildings here. And next I'm going to paint the roofs and the awnings here. I hope this is dry. This color is not the same color as the first sketch. I'm not exactly sure what this color is. It could be transparent pyro orange. It could be. It looks like it. PO71. Now, sometimes you have to work fast, but sometimes you do have to take your time, especially if you want to get the shapes right. So here I do have to paint a bit slowly so that I don't accidentally paint over the things that I don't want to paint over. Remember all the chairs from earlier? Okay. Those chairs have to be in red. Okay, I think I'm done with the red. Maybe let me add a little bit of blue, a little bit of cobalt blue, and a bit more water to paint the windows. So for the green I have, if I am not wrong, this is azo yellow. So I'm going to mix azo yellow with cobalt blue dip and see what we can get first. If this green is not dark enough, we can then use indentrum blue. With my earlier sketch, the leaves they don't show off that well. Next up, let's paint the shadows. So is this dry yet? Okay, I think this is dry. So let's paint some dark shadows. I will be using Azo Yellow, Indentron Blue, and Transparent Pyro Orange. So let's paint the bottom here first with the wash. Okay, this whole area here below will be dark. Let's paint the tree here much darker, as well as this building in the background, and this one here as well. Add some details here. In Dendron Blue, it's really dark. This tree trunk here, let's have it very dark as well. The windows on this building. This part here may be dry, so let's use a lot of Indentron Blue. Oops, I am covering some of the people there. So for this part, it's going to be, wow, that's a bit too dark. Let's leave some lighter areas for the lights. I feel like this building has to be much darker, so let's paint over with a diluted wash. And this here seems to be in shadow as well, so not that bright. More shadows here. Let's make this a bit darker. Seems like this area it has dried to become lighter, so I need to make it darker again. But I don't have to paint over the whole area. I can leave some of the lighter area for details. This sketch is almost complete. Let's add some details on the ground. I want to add some yellow markings, road markings on the ground. And maybe let's have some splatter marks. Let's have red. To create some texture. Time to add some details. Okay, this is too thick. This is the no entry sign. I definitely spent more time sketching this compared to the earlier sketch. So this sketch, it does look like it has more details. Let's have the white here. I can use the white gel pen to add some highlights to some of the trees here in the background. Highlights here for the leaves. So this is how the new sketch looks compared to the earlier one. So there is definitely more details here because I have more line art for the people and the chairs here. Additional line art for the windows and also the details created by the white gel pen. And there's this street lamp here. See the shape here for the leaves, this green shape, it doesn't have the jagged lines, so here we have the jagged lines which make the shape look more like leaves rather than like blobs. Here's a close-up on the sketch. So this is Cobalt Blue Deep. And this is French Ultramarine, which is a more vibrant color. It also has granulation, but I do prefer the granulation of Cobalt Blue Deep. The difference is actually very subtle. Anyway, with French Ultramarine, it's a more vibrant color, so it's better for painting darker darks. With Cobalt Blue Deep, you have to use a lot of blue, and this is not a cheap color, it's quite expensive. So if you want to mix shadows with Cobalt Blue Deep, you have to use a lot of paint. If you want to mix shadows like this, you have to use a lot of Cobalt Blue Deep, which is why I use Indentron Blue here. So this is Indentrum Blue, much darker compared to French Ultramarine and the mixes. Also notice the orange or the red here. This is transparent pyro orange, and this is some scarlet, or I'm not too sure, maybe a warm red. And you can see this orange, it's not as striking compared to this red. I mean, when you use pure red color straight from the tube, sometimes the color can be a bit too striking. Colors from the tube, it's best used when you mix it with a little bit of other color. So in this case here, I probably should have mixed it with a bit of yellow for additional variation to the wash. So this orange is quite nice. It has some light areas and some more intense area. So this is the road. There's a lot of details here which I have simplified. The shadow here on the ground, it's actually not as interesting compared to the earlier sketch. So this is the warm red with French Ultramarine. You can see this wash, it looks like Ultramarine mixed with burnt sienna, but this is not burnt sienna. This is actually a mix of the three primary colors. But here, this is Indentrum Blue with Azo Yellow and the red. So this particular combination, it doesn't look as nice compared to this. Certain combinations of colors will work well together to give you really beautiful washes. By beautiful washes, I mean washes where you can still see the colors within the washes. So you have to find out what those combinations are yourself. Alright, this is the sketch. If you guys have any questions, let me know in the comment section below, and do consider supporting me on Patreon, where you have access to even more tutorials like this. Alright, thanks for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye!